In most franchises, a player like Shedeur Sanders would be fast-tracked. Dynamic, marketable, and shockingly effective in early reps, he looked every bit like the future. But in Cleveland he became a threat. Not to defenses but to decision-makers. That's why, when the injury excuse appeared out of nowhere, it felt like a chess move, not a medical report.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Analysts are now saying the silence around his status isn't just suspicious, it's strategic. And behind that strategy is a franchise culture that sees rising stars not as assets, but as disruptions to be neutralized. This goes beyond just one player's story. It reveals a chilling truth. In the NFL, talent alone isn't enough. If you shine too brightly, too fast, and if you're not in the right political lane, the system will find a way to dim you. Sanders' case is a glaring example of this suppression. What should have been a breakout moment is instead a warning that the league still isn't ready for athletes who challenge the script. And until that changes, stories like this will keep playing out in silence. The Cleveland Browns didn't just bench a rookie quarterback. They triggered a full-blown scandal, one that's now eating away at the credibility of both their franchise and the league they play in. At the center of it all? Shedeur Sanders. A name that's been burning through headlines, message boards, and analyst segments ever since the Browns pulled what many are calling one of the most tone-deaf, blatantly political moves of the season. Sanders showed up to training camp and dominated the conversation. Not because of his last name, not because of outside hype, but because he performed. He delivered sharp throws, showed command of the offense, impressed teammates, and brought a level of poise that looked anything but rookie. Then, suddenly he vanished. The Browns called it an injury. But fans noticed the silence that followed. No details. No updates. No medical clarification. Just the vague suggestion of tightness or management, depending on which coach or executive you ask, followed by weeks of Sanders completely missing from the lineup. That's when the narrative started unraveling. Because when a young quarterback comes in with undeniable momentum, only to be sidelined for no clearly stated reason, people start asking questions. And those questions got loud. Fast. Was this really an injury? Or was this a cover-up? According to insiders, analysts, and a rapidly growing fan base rallying behind Sanders, the injury was nothing more than a fabricated excuse. A distraction. A smoke bomb thrown by a franchise too insecure to deal with what was unfolding in front of them. A rookie outperforming their hand-picked veterans and threatening the balance of power inside the building. And when you peel back the layers, that accusation starts to look less like a conspiracy and more like reality. Because this isn't just a one-off incident. It's part of a broader pattern across the NFL where fresh talent is controlled, manipulated, and sometimes outright suppressed. Not because it's lacking, but because it arrives too soon, too fast, and too confidently for the establishment to handle. The Browns' actions suggest more than poor management. They signal deep-rooted insecurity and a fear of competition that has plagued the franchise for years. This is a team that's made more headlines for chaos and crisis than for winning. So when they finally get a quarterback who turns heads for the right reasons, their instinct isn't to develop him, it's to hide him. That's not caution. That's sabotage. The fact that they chose to do it through a fake injury is telling. Because injuries in the NFL are the perfect shield. They require no proof. The league doesn't question them. The media can't access the full picture. And fans are just expected to accept it. The Browns didn't bench Sanders with an honest explanation. They created a convenient fiction, hoping it would be enough to calm the waters while they quietly protected their fragile internal dynamics. It didn't work. Instead, it created a backlash they clearly didn't anticipate. Fans flooded social media. Former players started speaking out. Analysts began connecting dots. And every day that passes without a real update on Sanders only makes the Browns look more dishonest and more scared. The bigger issue here is what this move says about the NFL's culture as a whole. This wasn't just a Cleveland problem. This is a league problem. The NFL has long fostered a system where teams can protect underperforming veterans at the expense of emerging stars. Where competition is touted as the core value, but control is the real currency. And the NFL's silence on the Sanders situation only reinforces that problem. There's been no statement, no investigation, no push for clarity, just passive approval through inaction. Which sends a message that couldn't be louder. If a team wants to suppress a player, the league won't stop them. That's not just disappointing. It's dangerous. Because Shedeur Sanders isn't just a rookie. He represents a new generation of athletes, charismatic, talented, media-savvy, and culturally relevant. He has the ability to connect with fans on and off the field. That's exactly the kind of player the league should be amplifying. But instead, the system responded the way it always does to disruptors. It shut him down. And it's not just about marketability. It's about merit. Sanders earned his attention. He showed up, put in the work, and by all accounts, outplayed expectations. Yet he's the one being buried while less impressive veterans hold onto their spots unchallenged. This is what systemic suppression of talent looks like in real time. And it isn't subtle. The manipulation is clear. The Browns created a storyline to avoid disruption. A vague injury report here. A few non-answers in interviews there. All designed to keep Sanders quiet and out of the picture long enough for the team to move forward without actually answering the hard questions. But here's the problem with that approach. It doesn't make the questions go away. It makes them louder. Why is a player who stood out during camp not getting reps? Why is there no timeline for his return? Why did the coaching staff go from praising his presence to pretending he doesn't exist? The Browns might have been able to slow the narrative, but they didn't kill it. Because what Sanders represents can't be contained with a press release. He represents potential. He represents energy. He represents change. And that's something no depth chart manipulation can erase. The irony is that in trying to protect the status quo, the Browns may have done more to accelerate Sanders' rise than if they had just let him compete. Now fans are watching. The media's watching. Every move this franchise makes is under scrutiny. And when Sanders finally gets his shot, which he will, every eye will be on him. Every snap will be judged not just by his performance, but by the shadow of this whole controversy. That kind of spotlight doesn't fade. It intensifies. And the Browns will have no one to blame but themselves. Because when you fake an injury to suppress a player, you're not just delaying his development. You're exposing your fear. You're broadcasting to the world that you're too weak to face competition head-on. And once that image sticks, it's hard to shake. And what about Sanders? He hasn't spoken out. He hasn't thrown anyone under the bus. He's done what professionals do. He's stayed quiet, focused, controlled. Which only makes the Browns' behavior look worse. Because now you have a young man doing everything right, while the franchise around him scrambles to justify a decision no one believes. This should have been a breakout season. Instead, it's turned into a scandal. One that will follow this organization until they either admit what happened, or it all comes undone in real time. So what's next? That depends on how much longer the Browns think they can hold this line. How long they believe they can stretch the fake injury narrative before it completely collapses. Because it's already hanging by a thread. And if they think this story is going away, they're wrong. Fans aren't letting it go. Neither is the media. Every missed rep, every week without a real update, every generic press conference, it all adds fuel to the fire. Because this wasn't a strategic decision. It was a cover-up. And when that gets exposed, the damage won't be limited to one player. It'll fall squarely on the Browns' leadership. On the culture they've created. On the league that let it happen. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe the Browns faked the injury? Was this about fear of competition? Or was it a full-on effort to suppress a player who threatened the comfort of the organization? Hit that like button if you're done watching franchises bury real talent in the name of strategy. Share this with someone who needs to understand just how deep the manipulation goes. And subscribe, because when Sanders finally takes the field, we'll be right here breaking it down. And we won't let anyone forget what led up to that moment. The longer the Browns keep this up, the worse it gets. At this point, they're not managing a quarterback, they're managing a lie. And it's cracking under the weight of public scrutiny, because this isn't a story you can bury with a couple of locker room cliches. This is bigger than that. This is about trust, credibility, culture. And Cleveland is losing all three. Let's call it what it is. Shedeur Sanders came into training camp and made people uncomfortable. Not because he was unprepared. Not because he didn't understand the playbook. But because he looked ready. Ready to compete. Ready to win. Ready to push boundaries that a franchise like the Browns simply wasn't prepared to confront. So instead of leaning into the momentum, they slammed the brakes. And in doing so, they revealed the truth they've been trying to hide for years. They are afraid of real change. It's easy to talk about rebuilding. Every losing franchise loves that word. But rebuilding doesn't just mean drafting players. It means actually giving them a chance to lead. And when a rookie quarterback shows up and outshines the names ahead of him on the depth chart, that's not a PR problem. That's a gift. That's your moment. That's your possible franchise cornerstone waving a flag in your face. But what did the Browns do? They panicked. They created an injury story. gave it no medical specificity, no rehab plan, no visible issue, no interviews, no timeline, just a carefully worded cloud of uncertainty designed to keep the questions vague and the rookie out of sight. And they expected us to buy it. They expected fans to nod and move on. They expected the media to take the precautionary phrasing at face value. They expected Shedeur to stay silent and let it happen. Only one of those things worked, and that silence is getting louder by the day. Because here's what they didn't account for. You can't suppress charisma. You can't fake away talent. And in 2025, you definitely can't spin a narrative past a generation of fans who see everything. We saw Shedeur's training camp clips. We heard the locker room buzz. We saw the way teammates responded to him. You don't fake that energy. You don't coach that kind of presence. That's not PR, that's instinct. And it was obvious he had it. Which makes the decision to sideline him not just questionable, it makes it absurd. The Browns had something special. Something that hadn't even taken the field yet and was already generating buzz, hope, and fan buy-in. And they didn't just mishandle it, they buried it under lies. This isn't just mismanagement. This is institutional fear. The kind that has haunted Cleveland's front office for years. The kind that tells decision-makers to stick with safe options and keep the spotlight tightly controlled. The kind that punishes new energy rather than embracing it. And what's the cost? Trust. Fan loyalty. And worst of all, developmental time for a quarterback who has already shown he's worth the reps. Because every week Shedeur Sanders is sidelined, his trajectory is delayed. Not because of any on-field limitation, but because the people in charge are afraid of what his success would reveal. It would reveal that their veteran plan isn't working. That the guy they thought was the answer isn't inspiring the locker room. That the rookie they buried might have been ready all along. And when that happens, when the curtain gets pulled back and we see how much of this was orchestrated, it's not just embarrassing, it's damning. Because you don't just owe your team wins. You owe them honesty. You owe them transparency. You owe them a real shot at success. And right now, the Browns are failing on every level. Meanwhile, Shedeur is being forced to play a waiting game he never asked for. He did his job. He came in prepared. He competed. He made it impossible to ignore him. And still, they found a way to do exactly that. They turned a camp standout into a ghost. And the NFL is letting it happen. Because let's not pretend the league isn't part of the problem. This culture of secrecy? The manipulation of injury reports? The complete lack of accountability for how franchises manage, or mismanage, young players? That's not an accident. That's a feature. The NFL has no incentive to demand honesty unless it directly affects revenue. And when a player like Sanders gets suppressed, it's seen as team business, not league interest. But that's where they're wrong. Because this does affect the league. The story is viral. It's everywhere. It's making fans question the integrity of not just the Browns, but the entire system. And if the league doesn't step in, doesn't even acknowledge it, then they're complicit. They're sending a message that performance doesn't matter. That merit is secondary to politics. That if a team wants to control a narrative, they can do it without consequences. And that's a message that will echo across locker rooms, college programs, and future draft classes. Because players talk. Agents talk. And if the perception becomes that teams like Cleveland will silence you to protect their narrative, then the league starts bleeding credibility from the inside out. All of this over a quarterback who dared to compete too well, too soon. That's what makes this so frustrating. Sanders isn't some diva demanding starting reps. He's not out here making waves in the media. He just showed up and did the work. He took the opportunity he was given and he turned heads. And instead of embracing that, the Browns hit the panic button. They didn't want competition. They wanted control. And they got it, at least for now. But here's the thing about control, it's temporary. Especially when it's built on a lie. Eventually, Sanders is going to play. It might be in Cleveland. It might not. But when that moment comes, every snap is going to carry the weight of this scandal. Every completion, every touchdown, every leadership moment, it's all going to expose just how wrong the Browns got this. And that's the moment the NFL will have to deal with. Because this isn't going to fade away quietly. This isn't just a developmental delay. This is a career manipulation. This is a franchise making decisions out of fear, and a league too passive to intervene. And Shedeur? He's just waiting. Patiently. Quietly. Letting the game come to him. Because real competitors don't need the mic. They don't need to force the spotlight. They know it'll come back when the truth does. And when it does, the Browns better be ready to answer for it. The Browns could have handled Shedeur Sanders the right way. They could have leaned into the energy he brought to camp. They could have recognized what was obvious to everyone watching. This kid has it. Not just arm strength or mobility, but the presence, the command, the intangibles that separate average players from franchise leaders. Instead, they chose fear. They chose silence. They chose to keep their system comfortable rather than let it be challenged. And now they've got a full-blown controversy on their hands, one that's turned their so-called quarterback plan into a punchline. Because let's be honest, what is the plan here? Let Sanders crush training camp, then sideline him without explanation? Keep vague injury reports on loop while your offense underperforms on the field? Keep fans in the dark while the franchise quietly hopes the buzz dies down? That's not development. That's deception. It's not like fans haven't seen this before. The NFL has a long, ugly history of burying rookies who aren't on script. Teams do it when they've already paid someone too much to fail. When they've publicly backed a guy and don't want to look like they made the wrong call. When a younger, hungrier player starts to get too good too fast. It's politics, but with a helmet and a depth chart. And the Browns? They've become Exhibit A. This was supposed to be a new era. A post-drama, post-rebuild, post-crisis Browns. They had the roster talent. They had fan optimism. And now they had a QB prospect who looked like he might finally give the team the spark it's been lacking. But instead of riding that wave, they pulled out the oldest trick in the book. Pretend he's injured and hope no one asks questions. Except now, everyone's asking questions. And not just about Sanders. About everything. About the team's culture. About their ability to manage talent. About whether this franchise can actually evolve, or if it's doomed to repeat the same cycle of mismanagement and mediocrity. Because suppressing Shedeur Sanders doesn't just reflect poorly on one position group. It calls into question the whole leadership structure. Who's making these decisions? Who benefits from this lie? Who decided that hiding a rising star was more important than building a real future? And who's going to answer for it when this blows up? Because make no mistake, it will blow up. It already is. Fans are furious. Analysts are calling it out. Players in and around the league are quietly whispering what we all already know. This wasn't about injury. It was about image. About avoiding uncomfortable conversations. About keeping the old system in place just a little bit longer. But the longer they hold on to it, the more damage they do. To Sanders. To themselves. And to the game. Because here's the uncomfortable truth the NFL doesn't want to admit. When teams suppress young talent for the sake of control, the league suffers. The game suffers. Fans disengage. And the players, the ones actually out there earning it, lose faith in the system. And that's what's really at stake here. Faith. Trust. How do you tell future rookies to come in, work hard, earn your spot, when someone like Sanders does exactly that and still gets benched for nothing? How do you tell fans to believe in the process when the process punishes the most promising player in the building? You can't. That's why this moment matters. This isn't just a roster move. This is a culture test. A credibility test. A turning point. Because sooner or later, Shedeur Sanders is going to play. Maybe in Cleveland. Maybe somewhere else. But when he does, and when he balls out, and based on everything we've seen, this moment will resurface. And the people who made this call will have to face the music. Because the receipts are piling up. The footage. The praise. The silence that followed. The injury that never had details. The bizarre refusal to let him compete. It's all part of the record now. A record the Browns won't be able to erase. And you know what's coming next. Other teams will start circling. Other coaches will be watching. The idea that Cleveland is sitting on a potential franchise QB while their offense sputters will become too ridiculous to ignore. And if they don't pivot soon, they're going to lose him. Not just physically, mentally, emotionally. You only get one shot to build that trust with a young player. You either show them they matter or you show them they're expendable. And right now, the Browns are sending the worst possible message. They're telling Sanders, your talent is a threat, not a gift. And that sticks. So what now? They can try to ride it out, keep stringing along the fake injury updates, hope people forget. But that clock is ticking. And every week Sanders doesn't play, the pressure builds. Every fan who sees their current quarterback underperform is going to keep asking, where is Shedeur? And the Browns will keep having fewer answers. Because there is no good answer. Not when the truth is this obvious. Not when the footage exists. Not when the fan base already sees through it. The smartest thing they can do now. Own it. Admit they got scared. Admit they mishandled it. Stop hiding behind ghost injuries and let the guy compete. But let's be real, when's the last time this franchise made the smart choice? Until then, Shedeur waits. He stays quiet. He trains. He watches. But the silence? It's not weakness. It's fuel. Because the moment he gets his shot, when the lies break, when the politics lose, when the talent finally takes over, it's going to change everything. And when that happens, don't forget who tried to stop it. Don't forget the decision makers who chose fear over football. Don't forget the franchise that buried its own future to protect its fragile present. And don't let the league off the hook either. Because this isn't just about Cleveland. This is about a system that lets it happen. That rewards control over transparency. That lets franchises spin stories while real talent sits in the shadows. That's not what fans signed up for. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should Sanders already be playing? Do you believe the Browns faked the injury? Is this a one-off mistake, or a symptom of something bigger in the NFL? Hit that like button if you're tired of watching great players get shelved to protect bad decisions. Share this with someone who still believes talent should win. And subscribe, because the moment Sanders hits the field, we'll be there. Breaking it down, holding the receipts, and telling the story the Browns never wanted told.